Okay, so what I've done so far is uh, instead of transferring with the transfer paper, because I just did a sketch right here by hand, um, I'm using who can help me out with naming this straight, horizontal, and vertical lines. What do we call them? Basic drawing stuff, right? Right, it is a perceptual grid, right? But what are the lines called? Plumb lines, right? Remember the plumb tool that builders use? So, but plumb lines do create a perceptual grid. So what I've done so far here is to aid the process of locating main landmarks, and also we can use the symmetry by dividing our format into two halves vertically and horizontally with axes. So vertical axis through the middle, horizontal through the middle here. You're gonna find a crosshair of some sort that will also guide your eye to quickly locate your landmarks where they need to be in relationship to the perceptual grid that you created. So I only need to block in her mouth here. The beauty of this value scale that we've done on the sidebar is that there are 7 squares, right? So it's easy to see where the middle is. It's just in the middle of that middle square, so you can divide that format with a quick guide through the middle here. My eyes are right below, and found the tip of the ear. So the squares are almost acting like a perceptual grid for me as well, which is great. I don't have to work so hard to find things. So a better approach would be keep your sketch loose, kind of just, focus on proportions and placement as opposed to getting a nice drawing at this stage. Maybe not quite that kind of a smirk. Here's a little tip for you guys. Sometimes, I can redraw with my eraser, but this eraser is kind of bulky. So, and I know it's hard to see on the screen, but I have like an old mechanical pencil that has a very small eraser that I can adjust my edge placement that way. Or you can use, you know, things like that. This is a wingtip pencil, and I had no idea why they call them that, but they actually have replaceable erasers, which is great, and you can extend your eraser. And I cut mine at an edge like this diagonally, so it's even sharper, and that way I can go in with the sharp edge of my eraser and redraw some of the edges this way, and don't want to smudge anything. So this brush has been with me probably for, I don't know, 15 years. Horsehair. Otherwise, graphite tends to get smudged. So before jumping into here, remember we've talked about using your sketchbooks for practicing your mark making. By the way, this is the dip pen that I was mentioning earlier to you guys. Just an old dip pen, and you can change the nib by whichever ones you like. I love this deeper well nib that I got a long time ago, and they're super affordable. Just to kind of give you a little sense of what you could do with that. Could be a lot more expressive, but also the line weight variation is much greater with a Crockwell pen. You can still do all the classical shading techniques with it. Just a little fun fact. Now let's go into my dry brushing stuff. Remember how if you're doing dry brushing, I was mentioning having paper towels. handy. So I'm gonna have mine here and just try to kind of get a sense for how you can do different marks before going into your actual finished drawing. So ink here. Here's the difference, right? This is old Bristol brushes, so it's gonna give me a lot more texture. Here's the difference between non-dry brushing and dry brushing, right? Lots of ink loaded to the bristles, so going opaque, there's not much texture. I guess you could kind of go like that, but it's still gonna be a lot of ink blobs. So now I'm gonna dry it off the paper towel here on the side. Better. And this is definitely a lot more expressive than, brush pen or any other tool with ink. So this one is just like a round Bristol brush. And see what you can create with that. I'm gonna see if I can get a little ink going on it so it's more chiseled, and just practice a few marks on your piece of paper on the side or in your sketchbooks. So because it's not natural Bristol, this one is synthetic, it's got a lot smoother texture to it. So within dry brushing, there's an infinite range of marks that you can create. This one is a flat Bristol brush. See how that goes. Can you guys still see what I'm doing here? Oh. I like the flat brushes more. I don't know why. I just like chiseling the form in. But that's just my approach. Okay. So now that I got my hand moving and kind of got the sense for what I might be doing here, I'm gonna move this to the side. I have a lot more paper towels here, by the way, just in case I need more to dry off my ink. You don't have to have it on the surface, you can just hold in your hand, that works too. Whatever works for you guys. So what I'm gonna do first is, one thing to remember with dry brushing is that it can go pretty busy very quickly, right? Because there's a lot of texture going on. So go minimal if you explore in dry brushing as opposed to going hard all the way in right away. I would place some larger marks first before shading anything. So let's see if we can do that first here. And also, doesn't matter which technique you're exploring, do have your original reference pulled up as well as your drawings, because it will have a reference of value structure and shading for you to look at. Okay, so let's see. And the ink does dry pretty quick, so when you dry off your brush, there's not much time in between you having to dip again. You guys are welcome to combine the dry brushing. So you can dry brush the whole thing without it looking just fuzzy all over. So you can use other brushes like, cheap watercolor brush. This is around number 5, just a artist grade, artist loft from, I don't know, Michaels or something. You can still combine the dry brushing with more cleaner line work if you'd like. That's fine with me. Notice again, back to my original point, I'm not really relying on my sketch. I'm just kind of, you can almost draw with shading, which is great for us. We don't have to worry about getting too precise and just have fun. Making her look like a zombie. So I am going around my main edges. Might need to get some more ink on this. Apart from drying it off on a paper towel on the side, it's before you go in with each mark, it's good to have that spare sheet of paper handy as well to just see if you still have a lot of ink like I have right now. Here you can still see there's too much ink on the brush, which means that it's just gonna create a blob of ink on the paper. So have a tester sheet of paper always next to you. That way you can avoid that whole situation. So still finding my placement here real quick, and then once I get a little bit more confident, it will just all quickly fall into place. But right now I'm just kind of getting the feel for the kind of texture that I want to create. I don't really have any answers. I just kind of go with the flow and see what happens with the dry brush texture and do my best to focus on the basics like value structure and proportions in the meantime. I might use, now that the brush is pretty dry, I might use some of that remaining dry ink that's not too heavy to shade around some areas that's a little bit more smoothened as opposed to big bold brush strokes. Might just kind of push a little value game here and scratch around like so to suggest some quick volume. There's a core shadow here around the chin. Always remember where your light source is coming from. That will help you as well. And underneath the nose. Now you might not be yet comfortable, and I stress the keyword here is yet, to go that loose as far as shading without, you know, line work, outside line work, or what we would call contouring. And that's fine. If you're not comfortable with that, that's fine. You don't have to do it the way I do it. This is just my approach. You're gonna have to find your own unique voice through experimentation. But you know, imitating other approaches is always a good way to learn new things and get outside of your comfort zone. So try something like that if you haven't before. Let's see, I want this core shadow. It's like a very dramatic sort of chiaroscuro effect that's wrapped around the forehead. And always remember basic light logic, and also when you shade, general rule of thumb as far as mark placement is what? We've talked about it before. Kind of like a basic idea of shading. If anybody can help me out. Huh? Yeah, yeah, exactly. Working around the form. You don't want to shade against the form. It's going to start looking too haphazardly placed, and you know, it's just the logic of that illusion is just going to fall apart in the final product. So it's good to keep your mark making to follow the form. So envision how the form bends in space and then go around that. Let's see. Okay, I got some good basic value structure. Doesn't look like much yet. Let me switch gears, and I'm gonna use my regular pointed synthetic brush right now. And if it's not quite pointed like mine right now, all you gotta do is point the brush right, just licking it, make sure it's nice and straight. I'm gonna load it, but what I'm doing right now, since you guys can't see, is I'm dipping it, and then I'm getting rid of some of the excess, and some dry ink, testing it on my tester paper. That's good. So let's go in with a little bit more mark making. That's not dry brushing, but just a little to accentuate some, perhaps some edges for where we need them to be recognizable, like eyes, and doesn't have to be a perfect contour. I want to stress that again, but maybe just some mark making wherever you feel like you need it. And running out of ink here. Doing this whole thing, drawing in the air like I always do before I kind of commit to a mark, just to get the feel for it. Yeah, the beauty of ink is that you can keep it more expressive too. You don't have to pretend to be a printer, as I call it, and give yourself permission to go a little bit more loose. Let's see, corner of the mouth is going to be like right here. It's basically the same approach that I did with the Micron pen, kind of just putting some landmark edges of key points, as opposed to going like this around all the edges. Again, nothing inherently wrong, but that's not how I work. I kind of jump around a lot too, so let's see. How you guys doing? Sleepy? I'm gonna keep it short, so we're not gonna have a fully rendered L here, if that's okay with you guys, and then I can let you work on your assignments. So we can actually dive in. Let's see. With the small details, there's just no way I can dry brush her iris and, you know, reflection in the eye. So that's why, another reason why I want to go in with a pointed brush and just kind of suggest suggest the shoulder line here and her jacket. Now, that is not to say that with the pointed brush it is not possible to do dry brushing. You can, like, I can do stuff like that, but control-wise it's going to start really escaping from you, if you guys can see what I just did here. I can't really control the edge of the brush as well, so it's going to turn into a mess very quickly. But it is possible to do that if you want to. I just like Bristol brushes for dry brushing better than this. Let's see. Very important thing to know, and that is probably something you guys already learned in previous classes, is that it's good to unify value masses. It is a general rule of thumb. So whether it's a bunch of highlights or a big core shadow that connects to the other part of core shadow or something like that, it's just a good habit to develop to unify value masses. An example here would be the casted shadow underneath her chin, kind of just unified visually with the back of the jacket. All right. Any questions so far? Who has done this kind of technique before, at least tried it? Not saying it's your go-to, but just who's actually tried it here before? Okay, some people have. It is so much fun playing with brushwork like that. Now I'm running myself into a corner. Who can tell me what's happening here with me? I'm smudging part of the drawing, so I need another piece of paper to make sure that the back of my hand is not smudging what I've placed. Let's see. And the brush is so versatile, you guys can do cross-hatching with it if you want to. There's all sorts of mark making variation that you can create with the brush that we just can't do with a pen. What do you think? Is it still looking like her, or? So right here I'm kind of just gonna do some hatching. I know this is a dry brush demo, but having a variation of different marks also gives interest to our work. So if everything is dry brush, then we don't know what to look at, and everything starts to look rather boring and just jittery altogether. But having a few different marks gives work interest and creates a sense of rhythm and gives our eye to some space to rest, so it's not all textured. Right now I'm dry brushing with my pointed brush here, which is also kind of fun, around the ear, and maybe dry brush right through These areas, I'm still kind of keeping in mind how the form bends and alternating the direction of the form. Still not committing to any. So what you don't want to do with any approach, especially with ink, is to try, and I think I may have mentioned it before, and try and nail the exact shading in the exact part of your artwork right away. You want to go slow and arrive there when you arrive there, but don't try to just nail it right away, because you need some foundation, you need underlying structure to guide your eye. And if you try to render one part right away, what's going to happen is 9 times out of 10 you're going to get your value structure wrong, and everything is going to be informed by that one early wrong decision. So it will fall apart very quickly if you rush and try to render parts separately. You guys with me on that? Cool. Maybe a little mark making here in the eyebrows to suggest some hair. She may not have that kind of defined look to her eyebrows, but this is a stylized caricature, so it's okay to take some creative liberties. Ink is drying out, so I'm kind of dry brushing around the eye here. And I'm using, basically I'm going with what the medium is telling me. So right now I'm running out of ink, the brush is getting dry, so I'm gonna use whatever is happening with my medium right now to make that into an advantage. So I like that it's drying out, so I'm gonna dry brush without strong, bold blobs of ink, and I'm gonna block in my shadow that way instead of dipping it again. So kind of let the medium also, just a little cross-eyed, but it's okay. The medium kind of guides you as well, what you could do with it. And almost done here. Might be that her iris is like rolled up too much, so we can correct on the go just like that. If you feel like things misalign a little bit, don't freak out. You can always go in and readjust things just like I did here with the eye, because I felt like she was looking a little cross-eyed. And there's no mistakes, only happy accidents, right? The proportions are definitely not spot on this second rendition, and that's probably not that I'm looking for an excuse, but what's happening with this thing with my brain, I keep overcompensating, and in the process I just don't see it. So I've noticed when I was transferring with the perceptual grid and the plumb lines, when I was transferring the original drawing, I kept like throwing myself off over and over, even though we have this 1-inch cells that are perfect squares. I could not see them as perfect squares. I don't know, my brain was just, and that happens because it's such a foreshortened view here that, you know, it was throwing me off. Hopefully you guys not gonna fall into the same trap when you're doing yours. But just a fun fact, make sure your setup is good and helps you with your creative process, and so you don't have to fight it like I am right now. I'm gonna go back to my dry brushing here a little bit and see if I can push some values, unifying, like I was saying earlier, I'm unifying some of the main structures, especially the core shadow. Gonna see if I can kind of shade across this whole section. So what I'm doing right now is just blocking in that whole plane. It is still considered following the form because I am not going against it. I'm still kind of envisioning the curvature, but I'm simplifying it the way we would simplify it with the Plano head. Those little plaster busts that we use to understand basic anatomy of the face. Gonna continue unifying this core shadow throughout the forehead, maybe a little bit more. And you know, the hardest thing to know is when to stop. So working with ink, again, I'm gonna repeat myself, but working with ink, you cannot undo. So it's best to take pauses often with something like that. Let's see. As opposed to zone out for too long, because chances are you're gonna find that you overworked your piece very, very fast. So a good rule of thumb, step back, look at it, see what needs to be pushed. Don't over-render it. And the last thing that I'm gonna mention before I wrap this demo up is that whether you're dry brushing or just doing ink, this is a reminder, you guys already heard me say that many times, that is transition edges, right? In the slideshow we talked about transition edges. You wanna pay attention to those. That is where different light logic transitions, or just, you know, dark and light value parts transition. So like a good example here would be her hair in the forehead, her hairline here. Because if you don't create a good transition edge, it's gonna look confusing in the final product, and we're not gonna know where one thing ends and another begins. So, and you can do transition edges like I'm doing here, where it's not defined again with the contour, just by juxtaposing contrasting values, and you'll be in good shape if you can do that successfully. Maybe a little mark making here for a little detail, suggestions like hair. I'm gonna go a little gestural here, kind of almost squiggling in some of the hair, again, because I don't want it to be too precise. I want it to have a playful, you know, fun, unique element to it. And let's see, in the image there's a lot of like core shadow right here through the hair, so I'm going to try to recreate it in my rendering. I would be excited to see how you guys render your caricatures with, if you're using dry brush or ink brush. It'd be awesome to see different styles, and by the end of it you'll be amazed at how many different styles we have in this room. As far as I guess what I was asking is, as far as basic fundamental principles, what is working here and what is not working here. putting myself on the spot here.
I mean, I think that maybe if you're the shadowing right under the nose, maybe a little bit, those vertical lines,
Yeah.
make
The,
it look a little more like you've got a bloody nose than
yeah.
shadowing.
It is a bloody nose.
Oh, okay, well then, no, it's perfect, sir.
No, it's Elle, right? She's losing her power and she's trying to use her telekinesis on.
Oh, that's, what's it called, Stranger Things. Sorry, I haven't been up on that show for quite a couple of
Yeah.
years.
Oh, we talked about it last time too.
Well, you know, I've been trying to catch up with my crazy life. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, yeah, sorry. I mean, I can't remember who was here, who was not here,
I
so.
just,
Yeah, this is, yeah, Millie Bobby Brown's character from Stranger Things.